Mid90s, which is the directorial debut of Jonah Hill. And it's produced, Jonah Hill, of course, being the star of the Jump Street films and Superbad, and actually 2-time Academy Award nominated.
Moneyball,
Wolf
of Wall Street.
Yeah.
He's brilliant. I love Jonah.
A big player. And he's working with this production company in the States called A24, who also gave directorial debuts to Bo Burnham and Greta Gerwig, with, I think you'd have to say, very fruitful results for 8th Grade for Bo Burnham and Lady Bird for Greta Gerwig. And along the lines of both of these films, this is kind of, it's not an autobiographical work, but it's connected to Hill's childhood, just as obviously Lady Bird was connected to Greta Gerwig's own upbringing, and also 8th Grade with its kind of online video YouTube-y aspect to what Bo Burnham became famous for. It's set in, of course, the mid-90s of the title, in Los Angeles, the low-rise urban sprawl part of the city. And it centres on this 13-year-old kid called Stevie, who's basically trying to find his place in the world. Stevie is played by Sonny Suljic, who was the one of 2 vulnerable children, hair-raisingly vulnerable children, in The Killing of a Sacred Deer, the Yorgos Lanthimos film. And he has that kind of sacred deer look about him, the very wide eyes, very vulnerable. You want to kind of take him and cuddle him like a little Bambi or something. But he's going out into the world in this. He's 13 years old. Home life is quite difficult. His single mother, Catherine Waterston, is obviously very loving, but she's quite distracted, I think, by responsibilities. There's also this suggestion that the fact that she is a single mother is rooted in some sort of unhappiness that is not ever brought out into the sunlight, but is hovering there. And his much elder brother, played by Lucas Hedges, who is just a thoroughly nasty
he's a horrible piece of work.
A bully and a loner and not a nice person to be around. So Stevie is looking for friends, and he thinks he locates some when he sees these slightly older kids messing around outside a skate shop in town. And they are maybe 15, 16. One of them is Ruben is much younger, but the 3 other guys, Ray is played by Nicole Smith, who is this kind of almost like the surrogate father figure of the group, who has the skateboarding skills to potentially go professional. There's 4th Grade, who's this guy who walks around with a video camera shooting everything in that kind of Spike Jonze way that kind of grew out the real mid-90s skate culture, of course, birthed Spike Jonze's career. Also Larry Clark's kids as well, which is a massive touchstone for this film. There's young Ruben, who's played by Gio Galicia, who is relieved with Stevie's arrival that he's no longer the younger member of the group, and starts quite amusingly lording it around that he's, this kind of sophisticated core member rather than a new arrival. And there's also a 4th character played by Jean Prennett, whose nickname we can't say on air, but is kind of this sort of gregarious cool guy of the team. And for him, it's better to kind of look like you're not trying at life. And for Ray, he wants to try and succeed, but obviously with the risk of failure at becoming a professional skateboarder. So there's this interesting kind of quartet of types that Stevie finds himself. He gradually becomes a friend just by sitting around and waiting for him to be kind of naturally absorbed into the group. Mm-hmm. Once he does so, because he has access to these activities that slightly older kids will do, he starts going through the coming of age process a little earlier than he perhaps should do. But this is actually the thrust of the film. Is it's about hanging around with these older kids and learning what it means to grow up slightly ahead of your time. Now, there's no kind of central plot line to it beyond that. It does climax in a kind of a large event, which I think has probably been during some script workshopping session. They decided there had to be some kind of big thing at the end that you can kind of say, okay, the film stops after this. But mostly it's a hangout movie. And so you have these kids practicing skating stunts, listening to music on a just exceptionally well-chosen range of period hip-hop and pop music on the soundtrack, and then also these fantastic, a brief but fantastic score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross as well. And they are going to parties, and they are drinking underage. They are injuring themselves by trying to do silly stunts. There's a section in which Stevie at one of these parties finds himself being seduced in a way by a slightly older but still obviously young girl. That's actually one of the key touchstones for the Larry Clark's Kids film, because Kids was this incredibly sort of cynical, even nihilistic look at children growing up in New York City in the 90s and having this kind of surrogate family of the skateboarding community, but also coercing each other into doing things that they shouldn't be doing. The way in which Jonah Hill films this scene, for me, was sweeter rather than exploitative. Yeah. It's not kind of, obviously, those two children are doing things that people start to do at that age. But the film is not leering, I don't think. The film is very much just kind of depicting it fairly honestly and fairly sweetly, and it's handled with quite a lot of care. I think this is something that really struck me that works about this film, is its very, very careful control of tone throughout. It's never trying to showboat. The comedy doesn't ever grow too broad, although there's a lot of abrasive back chat in that Jonah Hill familiar style. When it happens, actually, it tends to be quite aimless. You know, the kids have this 5-minute argument with the security guard about almost nothing. And it's just the pleasure of kind of hearing them be
how it would
daft
be
with each other.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
There's another great scene where there's a concourse outside of a courthouse is this place where skaters will congregate, and the police arrive to chase them away, and it's like scattering pigeons. You know, there are hundreds of skaters just going everywhere, and the scene really kind of amounts to nothing. And at the end of the film, I found myself looking back and thinking, what's actually happened here? You know, we've been with this kid and we've watched him kind of get to the cusp of teenagehood, and he's had little forays here and little forays there, but I don't know whether any of it counts for anything. And actually the sense of not knowing was really refreshing and really lovely. I just enjoyed the fact that this film was not trying to say some kind of grand statement about the human condition. Now, look, contrast this with something like Lost River, the Ryan Gosling film, which he did as his directorial debut, where it just looks like he's calling in a lot of favours from, you know, Nicholas Winding Refn. He's trying to do a bit of Terrence Malick here, a bit of Refn there, a bit of David Lynch there. And it's just this kind of totally preposterous, overblown mess. Mid-90s is a really smart first film. You know, in these party scenes, there's this great tracking shot where it follows one of the kids with the nickname we can't repeat in from the garden to the fridge to pick up some beers, and then the tracking shot continues and follows them back out to the garden. Now, tracking shots are this big kind of showboating style of cinematography that you often see people just say, oh, look how confusing and circuitous we can make this camera movement. How cool, how macho. And this is just like a minute long. It's very simple, but it beautifully establishes the atmosphere at this party. I think you've got Herbie Hancock's Watermelon Man playing in the background. And it's just, you know, it's doing the basics right. It's getting the basics right.
Yeah, I'm so impressed with this as it being his first film, and it's interesting kind of talking about the history, the production company and stuff, and that kind of support, almost kind of like safety net that they've given these kind of new filmmakers, although they're kind of established in other worlds within the film world sort of thing. But it's so true to him as well. Like, all the music that's in it is the music that he listened to when he was a kid, and never ever thought that he'd get to the point where he was able to put this in a film as a filmmaker.
Right, and the music cues aren't overtly nostalgic.
Yeah.
The film does not feel like it's looking back at the mid-90s through, through rose-tinted glasses. What it feels like to me is a film, and this is, I'm sure the intent, is a film that was made in the mid-90s, then put in a shoebox somewhere, shoved under a bed, and then he's got it out, you know, 20 years later and said, have a look at this.
Yeah, it's really, really good. I'm really impressed.
And the music, I mean, I almost needed physio. I was nodding my head so much during this.
Same.
Liquid Swords comes on, it's like, and
it's so, the script as well. I mean, I'd be interested to find out from him how much of it was improvised and how much of it was scripted, because a lot of the kids are real skaters, but to get that balance right of kind of authenticity of that world, of them being real skaters, but requiring performances out of them is brilliant with the casting and stuff as well, but also the script and how he's put it all together as well just feels really fresh. It just feels really true as well.
Yeah, it wasn't the film I was expecting to see by quite some distance. I thought it was going to be super bad on skateboards, and it's not.